Semantics is a branch of linguistics which deals with meaning. It forms an important part of linguistic study along with phonology, which is the study of sound structure, morphology, which is the study of word structure, and syntax, which is the study of sentence structure. Now, if phonology, morphology and syntax talk about word, sentence and sound structures, semantics deals with the meaning component. It shows how words mean, explores the different kinds of meaning patterns that language operates through. The major kind of meaning difference one finds in the study of semantics is the difference between the connotative and denotative meaning. Connotative meaning, as you see, is the basic distinction on which meanings rest. It is also otherwise the distinction between sense and reference. Denotative meaning, on the other hand, can talk in terms of the extended meaning of a word or a sentence. Denotative meaning is also sometimes called the literal meaning, and meaning can be arrived at by what is called the componential analysis. Now, the componential analysis is a way of breaking up the meaning of a word into small parts and looking at it as contrastive features. As you find on your screen, the word woman can be looked at as being plus human, plus adult and minus male, whereas a word like boy can be plus human, plus male and minus adult. As contrasted to denotative meaning, connotative meaning is what an expression means over and above its conceptual context. It is otherwise called the reference. These meanings are generally open-ended and indeterminate. If we take up the same words we have discussed before, the word woman and boy, you find that the connotative meaning will be something like this. The word woman might mean gentle, compassionate, sensitive, strong, mature. And the word boy could mean anything like youthful, childlike or sometimes even inexperienced. Although these are the major differences we find in the study of meaning, the world of words is much more complex and they are connected to one another in many complicated and multiple ways to create what is finally called the meaning web. Take for a very common example, you sit to write on a table, but you also fill up details of expenditure in a table. Now, these two words table are similar yet different. Now, if you look up the dictionary meaning of words, you again find a very interesting process at work. Look at this. The word benefit means, in the dictionary it says it is advantage or profit. Look up the word advantage again. It is anything like gain, benefit or profit. The word gain, if you looked up, says increase or obtain, and if you look up the word increase again, it says it's a rise or enlarge. You find that all these words basically lead to one another. They mean by what the other words say, they mean through one another, they complement, they supplement and ultimately they create what is called a web of sense relationships, which is otherwise also called the semantic field of a word. When you look at the semantic field of the word, we find that various words within the semantic field also exist in many different kinds of relationships with one another. The most well-known, the most popular kind of a semantic relationship is the relationship, the distinction between the syntagmatic and the paradigmatic relationship. Now, the paradigmatic relationship, as you find, is the relationship between words at a particular point in the sentence. Thus, for example, the sentence, "A flock of birds attacked the snake." In this sentence, the word birds could be substituted by sheep, goats or people. The sentence would remain meaningful still. If this is one kind of a relationship, there is another kind of a relationship between the word flock and birds, flock and goats, flock and people. If in the first case the word means by substituting itself with other words, in the second case the one word looks forward to, keeps company with the other word. These two can roughly be said to be the difference between the syntagmatic and the paradigmatic relationships. Again, can be slightly, the words which have got paradigmatic relationship with one another can have different kinds of meaning patterns. For example, look at the sentences. I have just bought a new bike. I have just bought an old car. I have just bought a new automobile. Or I have just bought a new vehicle. Now, in these sentences, the words car and automobile are related to one another in a relationship of synonymy. They are almost synonymous with one another, but synonymy, again, let me warn you, is an extremely complicated concept. They are related and yet not related. Similarly, if you look at the two words old and new, in the words I have just bought an old car and I have just bought a new bike, the two words old and new share a relationship of antonymy. That is, they are antonyms of one another or the opposites of one another. There are other kinds of relationships also which exist between words. Take for example the relationship between vehicle, car and bike. Now, vehicle can be seen as a more inclusive concept which would include car and bike. You can see that in the diagram put over there. Vehicle is the outer circle which includes the concept car. This relationship can be said to be a relationship of inclusion. But now if you look at the two words car and bike, the relationship is very different again. We cannot say I have bought a new car and I have bought a new bike at the same time and mean the same thing. It can either be I have bought a new car or it can be I have bought a new bike. Now, since they cannot be substituted for one another in the same context in very much the same way, they are said to have a relationship of incompatibility. Now, when we think in terms of sentence structure, this concept of inclusion becomes very, very important. It includes the concept which is known as presupposition. Take for example a sentence like, the King of France is bald. It presupposes various concepts, various things like there is a place called France, there is a country called France, there is a king of the country called France, and then people can be bald. The sentence will be meaningful only when we take all these three concepts only when we take it for granted. Take another sentence, a little problematic sentence which we keep listening to all the time around us. A sentence like, don't cry like a woman, be patient and brave. Think of the concepts it presupposes or entails. It means women cry, women are not patient, women are not brave, and also men don't cry. Now, all these things have to be presupposed for this sentence to find meaning. Contrast this with what we had done some time ago when we were talking about the connotations of the word woman, where we did mention mature and strong. Both the things seems to happen and happen correctly so in different contexts. Another sentence which deals with entailment. We raised funds for the flood victims. Another sentence, the flood victims needed help. Now, if the previous sentence talks about presupposition, here the first sentence entails the second. For example, when we say we raised funds for the flood victims, we entail the concept that flood victims need help. Look to another sentence. The whole family went to the park. Automatically, this sentence entails that my father and my mother came to the park with me. I would like to point to two more sentences when we are dealing with the concept of entailment. Look at this. This is a statement about the dwindling population in the drought-stricken villages of India. It says, there were no able-bodied people around. They had all left hunting for work, leaving the old, the women and the children behind. A very interesting sentence, because when we say there were no able-bodied people, it should entail men and women and old men who are not really become weak. But then the next sentence, they had all left hunting for work, leaving behind the old, the women and the children, shows that from this entailment, the women, the children and the old have been automatically removed, which means that when it was able-bodied people in the first case, the concept people meant only adult men. Again, try to break it down into the componental analysis. It would mean plus male, plus young, plus strong, excluding all the others, even strong women and strong children. Look at another sentence. This is a part of George Bush's speech after 9/11. It's a very famous speech, supposed to be very politically correct or wrong maybe. The sentence is, this is war against America. This is war against humanity. Either you are with us or against us in this war against terror. Now imagine the amount of implications this sentence has, the amount of presuppositions and the amount of entailments it contains. This is war against America is followed by this is war against humanity. Does America entail humanity? Look at the next sentence. Either you are with us or against us in this war against terror. Terror in a certain sense becomes a very large kind of a concept which includes everything which can be done against anywhere, anyone in the world. But here it seems to mean whatever is done against America in a major way constitutes terror. In these two sentences we find that the concept of presupposition and entailment can be quite dangerous also. In fact, in many places, in most instances, meaning emerges by what the sentence presupposes and entails, and in a major way it naturalizes, it tends to condition us to believe that certain facts are true and whatever the questions are against these facts cannot be true. It naturalizes certain facts, it legitimizes certain positions. In this sentence, for example, again, it legitimizes American position vis-a-vis humanity, trying to tell us in a way that whatever is against America has to be against humanity, or else it is not correct. Now, let us go on to the relationship of syntagmatic, the syntagmatic relationship of words. Paradigmatic relationship occurs when the words can be substituted, but as I have told you before, syntagmatic relationships look at the linguistic patterns and the way they relate to one another in a certain sequence. If paradigmatic relationship occurs between words which can be substituted for one another, syntagmatic relationship looks at the linguistic patterns which relate lexemes or word units occurring in sequence. Although not much work has been done on syntagmatic relationships, there is a lot more work that has been done on paradigmatic relationships. But in syntagmatic relationships, work on collocation is a very major area of interest. A lot of work has been done to see how words collocate with each other, how they keep company with each other. It's very interesting to see that when you utter the sentence, it was an auspicious dash. The sentences which will automatically come to your mind are occasion, event or omen. Similarly, when I say green with in a certain context, most probably you will say the word jealousy. When you throw eggs at somebody, they are always rotten eggs. You throw rotten eggs at people. But then when milk goes bad, it always becomes sour. The relationship is that of green with jealousy, rotten with eggs and milk with sour. It is very interesting to see how different cultures relate words differently. In fact, the relationship of collocation is also intimately connected to the culture the words are being spoken in. A lot of work has also been done in this area in the field of psycholinguistics, and psycholinguists believe that words collocate with one another somewhere in the mind also. That is, when a certain word is being acquired or learnt, it forms in the same field, it is acquired in the same area, it is stored in the same area as other words which collocate with it. Now, one cannot talk about syntactic relationships without in a short way mentioning about pragmatics. We have seen till now that semantics primarily talks about relationships between words. But when we talk about relationships between words in the context of a sentence, the unit becomes much larger than the sentence, and this is called the discourse. Here, the way words mean, the way meaning is constructed is said to be the study of pragmatics. Very interestingly, take a sentence like, I have a flat tire. It can mean anything like, I cannot pick you up, I cannot go, I am stranded, or even I refuse to go. The context very significantly will decide what is being meant, and surprisingly, the people who are involved in this conversation will also know what exactly the meaning is, what meaning is being constructed and for what purpose. Now, all this I have talked about till now falls in the category of what is called structural study of language, structural study of meaning. Apart from this, the recent years has seen tremendous growth in what is also called the post-structural concept of meaning making. Here, we move away from the structural concept when a word or a sentence has a meaning, and the study shifts to looking at what meanings are constructed, how, for which purpose. Here, meaning is not looked at as a stable, constant form. Rather, it is seen as a flux, a kind of a process where meaning is constructed for a certain purpose even as a conversation is happening. Meaning here is even words, and word meanings here are even looked at as ways of defining reality, creating reality, constructing for us a sense of ourselves, or what is called the subject positions within which we operate in a discourse or in a certain cultural structure. A very interesting concept that goes along with semantics, word meaning or phrasal meaning, is the concept of ambiguity. Look at a simple sentence, time flies. Time flies. Flies becomes a verbal expression which says what happens to time, the action which is connected with time. In the second sentence, time becomes the adjective of the word flies. Look at another sentence. Visiting neighbors can be irritating. Do you think there is an ambiguity in that sentence? Visiting neighbors can be irritating. In the first situation, neighbors who visit, that is, the adjective of neighbors is visiting, and people who visit, neighbors who visit, can be irritating. A similar sentence would be, flying planes can be dangerous. Here again, the first meaning could be an adjective of planes which says planes which are flying can be dangerous, an ing form added to the fly which makes it an adjective here. The second meaning could be once flying planes can be dangerous. That means if you flying planes, the act of flying planes can be extremely dangerous. The third sentence I would like to look at is, they called him a taxi. Now, if you make an IC analysis of this sentence, depending on the different meanings of the components of this sentence, you have to make two very different structural analysis. In this program today, we have talked about the different kinds of meanings we find in a language. We have talked about how meaning is studied by looking at the connotative and the denotative meaning, the connotative being the sense and the denotative being the referential meaning. We have talked about the concept of componential analysis, which enables us to break up words into parts and look at what constitutes their meanings in terms of plus and minus values. We have even talked about the semantic field, which talks about the network of sense relationships within which words mean. And finally, we have talked about the concept of presuppositions and entailments, which tells us how words and how sentences mean in a given context.